Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their diverse stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you'd like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. We'd like to thank TR Sun for their song All Good on today's episode. If you'd like to follow along, or if you're like me and seeing the lyrics make listening to music more accessible to you, then check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. Now, on today's episode, Mitch Boucher joins us to discuss rejection-sensitive dysphoria and his love of Baroque music. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. Mitch, thanks so much for joining me here on Autism Stories.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And I'd like to start off by learning, where does your story in the autistic community begin?
I overthought that question when I read it, and so my literal answer to that is that after my diagnosis in 2022, I looked for groups which were local to my state, and I found that one group, a couple of hours away from me, has online monthly Zoom meetings. And so when I was around the time that I was diagnosed, I started to join that group and got to know everybody. And they had people throughout my whole state, or people who used to live in my state and were part of the group in person. And since then, my participation's kind of dwindled a bit, mostly since I've become more comfortable with it and not feeling the need to just exist in an online group, with at least my own autism and knowing individuals that way. So that's the literal answer, I suppose, to that question. I guess if I could elaborate more, just because I was diagnosed in 2022 doesn't mean that I didn't have it for the previous 28 years of my life, and I don't know where I'm going with that. But yeah, that's my answer to that first question.
Now, I read where you said that one of your goals is to help dispel stigmas about autism. What are some stigmas about being autistic you would like to dispel?
So for that question, I probably had meant the word stereotypes over stigmas. And I guess it's a little bit of a difficult question to answer because autism is a spectrum. Just because you've met one person on the spectrum doesn't mean that you've met everybody. I guess if I could find a way to help change the broad general idea of what autism is based on things like the media portrayal or overall misinformation when it comes to autism. I mean, most folks might think that it only affects young men or young white boys in particular. It really doesn't. And I think, going over my notes here, one thing that I wish that we could change would be fears around how we might be perceived as a whole based on just the actions of a few individuals who the public might know about. So I'm not 100% sure if I've fully answered that question. I'm sorry.
No, you absolutely did. In doing research to kind of prepare to talk with you, I had the pleasure of reading your blog on Substack. And in one of your posts, you talked about having rejection-sensitive dysphoria, something many autistic people experience. Are there some common experiences or situations that have come up for you that sort of trigger your rejection-sensitive dysphoria?
sometimes criticism is something which I either take very poorly or used to take incredibly poorly, especially if I was receiving good feedback on what I'd been doing anyway. That particularly really throws me off. For specific examples, back when I was first working retail, I was known as one of the fastest cashiers because I just was because there was no reason to be slow, basically, um, and everybody appreciated the fact that I was very fast. Maybe not necessarily personable or talkative because I didn't know I had autism when I started working retail in 2016. But anyway, I was thrown for a loop when hearing all this great feedback from coworkers, customers, that sort of thing. And then one day, the manager pulls me aside and says, "Well, you're going too fast. You're not being talkative enough. You're not being personable enough. I don't know what's going on." And so that kind of criticism left me in a bit of a mental murk for a while because it just seemed contradictory. And of course, once I got diagnosed and was learning about autism and everything that comes along with it, RSD included, I could recognize when I was going through a bit of a muddle with RSD and saying, okay, that's what this is. Maybe we'll see if we can just acknowledge what's going on and then just go from there. And typically it's just gotten a little bit better.
So just kind of being more aware of what's happening in the moment.
Exactly. Kind of like grounding yourself during an anxiety or a panic attack.
In the same blog post, you stated that I've been the trouble and I've been toxic. I've been too much, also too little, and not enough. A lot of this came before I knew I had autism. So I love self-reflection like this, and this immediately makes me think about how is learning about your autism impacted how you kind of navigate the relationships in your life.
I like that question a lot. Again, just pretty much to piggyback on what I had just said, when you know what's going on, it's easier to, I don't want to use the word combat, but definitely manage. Knowing, for example, that I might have limitations or boundaries or energy when it comes to socializing, instead of burning myself out and people pleasing or being around people too much, I've now understood that I need more time where I can just be by myself and either prepare for the day or process the day. Um, there aren't many interpersonal relationships that I have that conflict with my autism because all I do is just work and then I'm home for the rest of the time. But the biggest impact that learning about my autism has had has definitely been in my personal and romantic relationship, where it helps to have the outside perspective, and it also helps me to understand that how I am when I'm in shutdown or what I can be like when I'm anxious or overstimulated could be sometimes could be seen as disquieting to other people around because it might be very difficult to be with somebody who only has a certain amount of mental energy per day to tolerate being around people, or might not have the energy to do much other than just sit around home all the time. So I hope that's a little bit of an answer of that question.
From what I understand, you're an amateur composer and keyboardist who admires Baroque music. What is it about this genre of music that you've connected with?
Oh boy, I love that question too. Um, I guess I don't know what specifically, because do any of us who have hyperfixations or special interests know necessarily why we're into those things? I mean, it's I guess it's one of those questions that we can't really fully answer, but I'll do my best. For me at least, with Baroque music, I found it to be the best form of expression before I knew what was really going on inside of me. I remember just hearing it, snippets of it on the radio, and figuring, oh, this is just very moving and beautiful music. And the more that I learned about the composers and the history of the music and everything involved with the doctrine of affections, the more I realized that I don't know. It's just very, very moving to me. And I would listen to a lot of Bach, mostly as a form of escapism, but also from a point of obsession. And I just began to imitate and eventually try to develop my own voice in that style. And I don't know, it was just music that I found really compelling. And a really interesting point is that when I read Devon Price's book, Dr. Devon Price's book on unmasking autism, he mentioned some kind of anecdote, and if you also know what he's talking about, I'd love to know, where how we as autistic people tend to have what is called bottom-up thinking, where, and I don't fully remember or understand what it means, but that notion of bottom-up thinking is actually really in line with Baroque music, because Baroque music is constructed quite literally from the ground up, in the sense that, for example, there's a ground bass, like a canon or a passacaglia, and then there are variations built upon that ground bass. Or in chamber music or vocal music, there's, oh, where did I write it? A basso continuo, um, where the bass has all these implications in terms of harmony or flow, and then all of the upper voices support that. So, from a literal perspective, it's just very interesting to think about that kind of parallel.
Now, I think music can be so helpful, so beneficial for so many different reasons. But I'm wondering if there's some ways music might help you to kind of better manage your emotions and help with the relationships in your life.
I loved this question, and I love it because it seems like it's asking more than one thing. And I guess my answer is that I don't necessarily know how it might play into personal relationships or anything like that. But for me, at least, music has always emphasized my emotions with an internal soundtrack, if that makes any sense.
Hmm.
Is as much a part of my brain and internal dialogue as anything else, really. I don't really know if I could describe it any way other than that.
I definitely relate to that because I think the stories that we tell ourselves are can be so impactful. And long before I knew I was autistic, the music that drew me in, all different types of genres, helped to form a better story in my mind than from the outside world that didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, especially when it comes to the world not making sense. I mean, for me at least, the order and familiarity for me with Bach and Baroque music definitely calmed a lot of the external chaos and sometimes the internal chaos. So I definitely understand what you're saying there.
I'm curious with Baroque music because to me, a lot of times I feel like words are overrated or words don't really express the things that I want to express, or I'm not good enough with them to kind of express those things. So I'm wondering how kind of Baroque music kind of like might fill in that gap for you, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I like that question too because it's something that I've always wondered when it comes to vague text sacred music, such as like a mass setting, where the words have no necessarily personal meaning to whoever's setting them to music. So I would always just figure that it really just comes down to the actual composer themselves and maybe what they're feeling in the meantime or what they've been through, general human experiences that might aid in the writing of something like a requiem mass. Um, and even with the instrumental music too. I mean, it's the same thing, I think.
Lastly, Mitch, how can our listeners learn more about you and your music beyond this interview?
There's not really a whole lot about me online, other than the occasional blogging. And for my music, at least, the only thing I've got to offer is just my YouTube channel.
Well, I definitely encourage people to check both of those out. It was, a pleasure to get to meet you, Mitch. Thanks so much for joining me here on Autism Stories.
Yeah, thank you very much, Doug. I enjoyed it quite a lot.
Thanks so much to Mitch for the conversation. To learn more about Mitch and his music, please check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. We always love hearing from you and would especially love to hear from you relating to this episode. If you've experienced rejection sensitive dysphoria, and how do you cope with that experience? Did you know Autism Personal Coach provides neurodiversity affirming support by autistics for autistics? We empower autistic adults and teens to be the best version of their authentic selves through customized life coaching and community groups. We also support parents and partners of autistic people by providing insights and guidance to bridge communication gaps and nurture mutual understanding. So please visit autismpersonalcoach.com to begin your experience of judgment-free coaching rooted in empathy, expertise, and respect for autistic identity. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.